Hello, my name is Rowena Keene, and for most of my life, I thought the hardest battles were fought overseas. I was wrong. The toughest one waited at my father's backyard barbecue, the moment he introduced me to his friends as his little clerk from DC. I had spent 20 years in uniform, leading men into danger he couldn't imagine. Yet in his eyes, I was still just a girl who filed papers. That was the day everything changed. The morning light slid across my desk, warm and indifferent. Files were stacked like fortresses between me and the window. Every ribbon, every medal I'd ever received lay locked away in a drawer, dustless, untouched. They weren't trophies anymore. They were timestamps of who I'd been before silence became my strategy. Sometimes I caught my reflection in the glass, an admiral with gray along her hairline, posture too straight for comfort. The younger officers called me ma'am with the kind of reverence that felt like apology. But even that could never erase the echo of my father's voice. Real soldiers don't hide behind desks. I had carried those words through sand, through storm, through years of missions I could never name. That morning, Lieutenant Tessa Park stumbled during her report. Her voice cracked on the phrase engagement protocol. I didn't correct her right away. Instead, I watched the tremor in her hands, the same one I'd learned to hide decades ago. After the meeting, I called her aside and simply said, "You'll learn to steady before they notice you shake." She nodded, half embarrassed, half grateful. Captain Lopez entered moments later, crisp uniform, quiet eyes. He placed a single envelope on my table. "From Ridgewater Veterans Association," he said. "Your father's signature at the bottom." The name hit harder than it should have. I hadn't been home in 7 years. Ridgewater, small, loud, always smelling of cut grass and gasoline. The place where pride was currency, and daughters were never quite sons. I held the envelope for a long time before opening it. A letter printed in old-fashioned ink invited me to the annual summer barbecue. "Bring your family," it said. "Bring your stories." There was no mention of my rank, my service, my life. Only "bring your stories," as if mine had been waiting for his permission to exist. That night, I sat at the piano my mother once played. The keys had gone slightly yellow, but the first note still hummed true. I remembered her hands, the way they paused mid-song whenever my father walked in, like music itself was something she owed him silence for. On the top of the piano sat her photo, eyes soft, smile half knowing. In the frame's reflection, I saw my own. "Don't chase respect," she used to tell me. "Build it." I turned the phrase over like a coin between my fingers. Maybe I had built it. Maybe I had only built walls. Outside, the city pulsed. Planes roared across the Potomac, and somewhere in those echoes, I thought I heard the rhythm of marching boots. My own footsteps had carried me through classified corridors and sleepless nights, through missions where decisions had no right answers, only survivors. Yet to him, I would always be the one who filed the reports, not the one who wrote history. I opened my drawer and pulled out the small silver insignia of Unit 77. Its edges were worn smooth from years inside my pocket. The metal caught the lamplight like a secret still burning. I traced its shape and whispered into the quiet room. I led the most classified unit in the Navy, but to him, I was still a clerk. The clock clicked once, then again. The sound of time pretending to move forward. When I finally booked my flight to Ridgewater, I didn't tell anyone. I packed only the essentials: my uniform, a pair of civilian clothes, and the insignia. As the confirmation email lit up my screen, I realized my hands had stopped trembling. He invited me as a daughter. I was going as an admiral. He lifted his beer and laughed. "Our little clerk from DC is home." The men laughed too. I didn't. Flags drooped in the heat, the grill hissed, and smoke curled into a sky already painted the color of old brass. Folding chairs scraped concrete as neighbors shifted for a better view of Richard Keene, master of ceremonies, veteran storyteller, and my father. He clapped my shoulder with a performative pride that never reached his eyes. I kept my posture neutral, chin level, the way you do when you expect incoming fire and refuse to duck. Names blurred past, shipmates, poker partners, men who knew the sound of a hangar at dawn. They asked safe questions about weather and traffic, not work. My answers were smaller than the truth, trimmed to fit a backyard. Every joke landed like a dull coin in an empty jar. Near the fence, a quiet man in a washed-out ball cap watched without smiling. Square stance, calm breath. The sort of stillness you learn the hard way. He lifted his chin by degrees, studying the edge of my sleeve where cotton rode high and a fragment of ink breathed, 2 sevens arranged like a doorframe. He didn't step to me. He closed distance like an operator picking his moment. "Ma'am," he said evenly, voice pitched to reach only the people who needed to hear it. "Unit 77, Operation Silver Dawn?" The yard stalled mid-laughter. A fly hummed in the heat. Someone killed the radio. I did not look at my father first. I looked at the man who had recognized me by a scar of ink and a set of habits. I nodded once. He straightened with a memory flickering across his face, the kind you never post online. Then he saluted, crisp and unhurried. "Admiral Keene, ma'am. It's an honor." Gasps. A chair tipped. A whisper from somewhere behind the cooler. "Admiral?" My father's grip loosened. His grip. The beer can slipped, struck the patio with a hollow ring, bounced and rolled until it kissed the base of the grill. The sound cut through the yard like a verdict. I heard Harlan Stowe mutter, "Holy hell," before his phone tilted up. The little red light winked to life as he framed the moment. A seal saluting a woman my father had just called a clerk. The screen caught it all. The salute, the insignia's gleam, the sudden quiet that falls when a story ends and the truth starts. Silas, because that was his name, and it fit, let his hand fall, eyes never leaving mine. "Years ago," he said, still measured, "your people found me where the map didn't. I was supposed to die in a room with no windows. I didn't." His jaw worked once. "I've owed Unit 77 ever since." "Then you know what we do," I said. "I do." He flicked a glance toward Richard. Not unkind, not gentle, just accurate. Around us, the veterans rearranged their faces. Curiosity, awe, denial. Like cards they weren't sure how to play. Someone started to clap and thought better of it. The grill popped, grease flared and settled. My father's knuckles were white where they gripped the picnic table. He looked at the tattoo as if it were a trick knife I'd hidden from him since childhood. "You said intelligence," he managed, brittle and slow. "I did," I answered. "And I do." There was nothing else to add that wouldn't violate laws I had signed with the same hand that now refused to shake. Harlan edged closer, framing Richard and me in the same rectangle. The air took on that strange weight rooms get before a gavel falls. I saw the future of the video, posted to the Ridgewater VFW page, threaded with comments from men who'd known my father when his back was straight and his certainty straighter. The story would travel faster than any correction he could make. Silas inclined his head. "With respect, sir," he said to my father, "you raised a warfighter." My father blinked hard. For the first time since I'd stepped into that yard, he seemed to notice how quiet I'd been. Not from shyness, but from discipline. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I had learned to speak only when it mattered most. He turned toward me, mouth open, words lost. For once, silence wasn't mine. It was his. He sat in the dark kitchen, the refrigerator's hum louder than his pride. Grease smoke clung to the curtains. A plate of half-eaten ribs sweated on the counter, the sauce dark and shiny under the weak bulb. The TV in the living room still muttered to itself. Someone had already clipped the barbecue and posted it to the VFW chat. I heard my name spoken by strangers' mouths, looping back through a cheap speaker, like a rumor with boots on. I stepped in to grab my bag and leave. His voice caught me mid-breath. You led Unit 77? I kept my hand on the strap. You could have known, if you'd ever asked. He flinched, the sound of it small and human. I wanted you safe. Safe? I took a slow breath and let it out through the teeth of my composure. I sent people into places we can't name. I signed orders that put planes in the air and men on the ground. I wrote letters to families when no one came home. Safe wasn't on the menu. His stare slid to the table edge. I was proud, he said, voice thin. Just ashamed I never got that far. Proud doesn't sound like clerk, I said. The word sat between us like a knife laid flat. Silence lengthened until the refrigerator clicked and started another cycle. I crossed to the pantry and reached for a stained spiral notebook. My mother's old recipes, weights, and measures in her looping hand. Between cinnamon bread and Sunday roast, a note I'd kept pressed for years. If he can't see your worth, the world will. The paper had gone soft at the fold, the ink held. I set it on the table, turned it so he could read. He didn't touch it. He didn't need to. The slant of her letters had already entered the room. He tried again, softer. I kept you small so I wouldn't have to worry. If you stayed near desks, I could sleep. I didn't, I said. And when I did, I earned it. From the other room, a ping. Another message from the VFW thread. He closed his eyes like the sound was a bell for a service he hadn't planned to attend. They're all talking. A beat. About me. They're talking about what happened, I corrected. The truth didn't change. It just stopped being private. His hands flattened on the laminate, the old sailor's veins standing like lines on a chart. Tell me what it cost, he said. Not the medals, you. I told him the parts I could, the hours of waiting for a tone in my ear that meant a pilot had cleared the ridge, the static-laced copy before a door blew and the lights went dead, the knock I made on a widow's house at 2 a.m. because daylight would have been crueler. I did not raise my voice. I didn't need to. The room knew the weight. His jaw trembled. He swallowed. I didn't want to be wrong about you. You weren't wrong about me, I said. You were wrong about what mattered. The words from the note glimmered in the corner of my vision. My mother's hand still directing traffic long after her last song. I placed 2 fingers on the paper, then lifted them away. You didn't just underestimate me, Dad. You erased me. He bowed his head and brought both hands to his face, not to hide, but because feeling had finally found him and demanded a place to sit. The TV fell into an ad break. The refrigerator settled. The house breathed. He didn't argue. He only said, I don't know if I can fix it, but I want to try. He wore his old uniform, 1 size too small and 20 years too late, but for the first time, it fit the man he was trying to be. Coronado's morning light was ruthless and clean, the kind that leaves no place for pretense. Flags cracked in the sea wind. Gulls stitched white arcs above the rows of chairs. I stood at the lectern and looked out over faces I'd trained to read. Operators, analysts, families who learned to measure love by absence. I spoke about quiet courage and unseen wars, about names that would never be etched in marble because secrecy had been the cost of their return. The words were simple, pared to bone. They didn't need music. They needed witness. Halfway down the aisle, a figure steadied himself into the front row. The dress blues were pressed within an inch of their life. The shoulders were wrong for him now, too tight, too proud, but he held himself as straight as the fabric would allow. Lopez angled toward me, just enough for a whisper. He came. I let the truth of that settle where guilt had once lived. Tessa Park waited near the guidon with the stillness of someone who understands the weight of what she's taking, not just the shine. When I said her name, she stepped forward, and the guidon changed hands cleanly. No tremor, no flourish, just the quiet click of stewardship passing. After the anthem, The formalities unraveled into the murmur of congratulations and the low percussion of boots on concrete. I was turning to thank the honor guard when the aisle cleared like a tide drawing back. And there he was, eyes shining with that fragile courage the young never recognize as its own kind of bravery. He reached into his pocket and brought out a ring whose gold had learned the color of years. "I should have given this to you years ago," he said, voice roughened by salt and time. I took it. It was heavy, the way a word can be heavy when it finally lands where it belongs. The ring warmed quickly against my skin, as if the metal remembered heat. Around us, conversations thinned to a hovering hush. "You didn't give it to me, Dad. I earned it." The sentence seemed to ring against the hangar walls. Lopez's hands came together first, two sure strikes that broke the silence without breaking the moment. Applause spread outward like wind moving through wheat, unshowy, inevitable. Harlan Stowe stood near the back, his phone lifted just high enough. Not a gotcha this time. A record. Richard's mouth trembled, but the old reflex to defend, to dismiss was gone. He squared his shoulders the inch that uniform allowed and lifted his hand. I returned the salute, not because of rank, but because the man in front of me had finally reported for a duty he had dodged for years. For once, our ranks were equal, a salute between two soldiers who had finally earned each other. He stepped closer, palms open as if approaching a skittish animal. "They'll see this, you know, the ones back home." His glance flicked toward Harlan, then back to me. "Let them. I was wrong in public. I can be right there too." Tessa moved to my side and, for a heartbeat, 3 generations of service formed a small constellation. What we had been, what we were, what would outlast us. The wind lifted the corner of the flag on the dais. The cloth snapped and fell, a breath let go. Richard closed my fingers around the ring, the way you close a hand around a promise so it doesn't blow away. His forehead leaned near mine, the brim of his cap shadowing us from the staring sun. His voice came on a whisper frail enough to break and strong enough to bind. He pressed the ring into my hand and whispered, "It's your turn to teach them right." I thought it was a beginning. It was his farewell. They buried him with full honors, the same honors he once thought I didn't deserve. The rifles cracked, the echo rolled down the marble rows, and the flag was folded with the slow precision of a prayer. When they placed it in my arms, I felt the weight of a language I had spoken my whole life: duty, without boasting; love, without applause. The sun had the thin warmth of late autumn, leaves ticked against the stones like soft metronomes. Behind the hill, DC went on with its necessary noise. Lopez hovered at a distance, a sentinel who knew when to leave me to the silence. Tessa stood still as a mast, hands clasped, absorbing a lesson the manuals never teach. Silas had the posture of a man who understands that memory can be a kind of weather. It arrives, and you endure it. After the last salute, they drifted back toward the road, and I sat on the cool grass beside his name. A small parcel waited on my lap, delivered at dawn, his handwriting stubborn as ever across the label. I slit the paper with a thumbnail. The navy ring lay inside, dull gold that remembered a younger hand, and beneath it, a letter folded twice. "You didn't just follow orders. You built the kind of navy I never imagined. You became what I should have been. And I see you now." The lines wavered where he'd pressed too hard, as if force could sharpen regret into courage. I smiled in spite of the ache and slid the ring onto my finger. It hung past the knuckle before catching. Some legacies never fit. You just learn to wear them anyway. The breeze rose and fell, carrying a faint salt whisper from a river that dreams of the sea. I stood, brought the flag to my chest, and saluted the stone. Footsteps approached with care. "Ma'am," Tessa said, voice low, "they're waiting at the Pentagon." "They can wait a moment." Silas joined us, a slim folder in his hand, stamped like a closed door opening, Case 77R, declassified. They're finally telling the world about your missions, he said. Then maybe we can stop hiding what's worth remembering. We started down the path together, 3 shadows pulling long in the clean light. I looked at the ring, then at the flag, and felt the fretwork of years locking into place. Not forgiveness exactly, but a design that held. For 20 years, I fought to be seen. In the end, I didn't need the world to see me, only to remember what I stood for. At the gate, traffic murmured like a river that could not be turned. I tucked the letter into my jacket and squared my shoulders toward the city that never stops asking for more. Tomorrow, I'll brief the Senate on special operations reform. And somewhere, I hope he's listening, finally proud, finally quiet. I've spent most of my life learning that silence can feel like armor, but it can also become a cage. If my story means something to you, tell me what you would have done in my place. Would you have fought to be seen or learned to let go sooner? Leave a comment, share your thoughts, and remember this: respect doesn't come from titles or approval. It's built every time you stand tall in your truth, even when no one else salutes.